So, welcome back to Philosophy for Flourishing, the show where we explore principles and practices for living the best, most fulfilling life possible. And today we're going to zoom out and look at some ideas and institutions that enable societies to flourish. On the last episode, you heard my talk, Benjamin Franklin's Principles for Freedom and Flourishing, and there was a good mix of both personal practices and some ideas for the social level for flourishing. And today we're going to really zoom out. I mean, we'll have a bit of both, but we want to talk a lot about politics and societies and what enables a society to flourish. What's the foundation for that flourishing? And I've got a new friend, Dr. Antonio Saravia. I'm sorry, am I pronouncing that correctly?
You got it.
Saravia, yes. So Associate Professor of Economics at Mercer University and also the Director for the Center for the Study of Economics and Liberty there, which is really cool. So thankful to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. Yeah.
So, we met maybe a month ago now at a conference in Colombia. And I was really surprised when I got there to meet several students from Venezuela who they had risked life and limb to come to this conference to learn more about economics and liberty. And I was having a conversation with them over dinner, and they were telling me about how much Marxism and socialism is still taught not only in their universities, but also in their primary schools, just in their basic education. And that really surprised me. And so, we met and we talked a bit about liberty, and you teach about economics and liberty and the connection between these things. So I was really excited to hear about that and really excited to have you on the show. Let's start. I'd love to just learn a bit more about your background and how did you get interested in economics?
Oh, wow. Let me first start by saying that it was great meeting you and great learning about your work and the institute you work for and the foundation and so on. It's always really a pleasure to find out people that are doing objectivism and that are thinking about the ideas that I teach. So it was great. And boy, those students from Venezuela, I mean, that was something else. They're telling us their story about having to cross the border from Venezuela to Colombia because they didn't have passports and all of this stuff, and then they were being scared about going back. So it was really eye-opening to see, on the ground, the kind of stuff that people have to go through to live normal lives in a country that is dominated by Marxist ideas. So, and yes, I did a lot of research on socialist indoctrination in Venezuela. So my co-authors and I, what we did is we grabbed elementary school textbooks from the Chavez era and compared those to pre-Chavez era textbooks in Venezuela. So try to do some apples to apples, first grade elementary versus first grade elementary, second grade elementary versus, and compare the different type of stuff that they were teaching. We did both a quantitative and qualitative analysis. So qualitative analysis was just essentially reading the textbooks and finding the differences. But quantitatively also, we counted the words, right? How many times some particular words were repeated, using kind of machine learning type of algorithms. And, how many times the word people, for example, or pueblo, the people was repeated in the Chavez era textbooks versus pre-Chavez and so on. And that was a great project. We found, of course, a lot of socialist indoctrination. We're doing the same thing for Argentina now. The Peron era versus pre-Peron era, trying to find now what the differences are in elementary school textbooks. And our next project is Cuba. So hopefully at the end, we're going to have 3 or 4 different, we want to do Chile as well, 3 or 4 different South American countries and put together a book. That's one of our, if I get a sabbatical at some point, I can put together that book. I got interested in economics back, of course, in Bolivia. I am from Bolivia, and I did my undergraduate education there. There was a little bit of pedigree in my family. One of my uncles was the former minister of economics of the country, and his brother, another uncle of mine, was the dean of the School of Economics in my university. So I kind of grew up under that type of family where there was a lot of talk about economics, and so it was a little bit natural for me to go into economics as well. But I didn't really know I was gonna like it that this much, and and I did my undergrad education there. Never read a single word of Hayek or Mises or Rand or anything. It was essentially Keynesian economics, of course. Um, but then I moved to Georgetown to do a master's degree, and
Good
that's
move.
I met a professor there that was into institutional economics and how important property rights were for development. And at that point, my curiosity awakened, and I started reading more interesting stuff from at the beginning Friedman, and then progressively move into Hayek, Rothbard, of course. I have right here, always on my desk, and that was it. And then I did a PhD at Arizona State University. I continue working on institutional economics, and that's what I've been doing.
So you grew up surrounded by a certain economic viewpoint, and really more than most people, you were really steeped in those ideas. Could you talk a bit about how you began to see problems with them, or if you did? I presume you did.
Yeah. Um, well, during my undergrad education, it was, to be honest, what I wanted to do was to get good grades, of course. And so I was not so much into contesting ideas or challenging the ideas that my professors were presenting. Some of my professors were very important people in Bolivia. One of my professors was the president of the central bank. We had ministers and so on. They would come and teach. They would come and teach at 8 in the morning. I remember most of my classes being really early in the morning because then they had to go to work. There's not a culture of full-time professors doing research and so on. These were more practitioners that would come and teach. And so I don't remember challenging a lot of their ideas, but I do remember getting this flavor of, if we continue doing this stuff or the stuff that these guys are doing, we kind of get into this circle, this kind of vicious circle in which we will never be able to see development and lifting people out of poverty. I remember having this feeling of being stuck. These guys are telling me all these technicisms, how you do monetary policy, how you do fiscal policy, but there was never a point in which was able to see the light. And Bolivia is perhaps the one of the poorest countries in Latin America, for sure. Probably the second poorest, only after Haiti. I would imagine. And so there was always this feeling of, yeah, hopefully I just get out of here and I do my life, but I don't see a way for the country to regain some, or to get some type of momentum and moving into development. So it was only when I got to my master's degree when I started seeing things more clearly, and I understood why I was having that feeling of being stuck back in Bolivia.
When did you start to see the connection between economic and political freedom and human flourishing?
On my master's degree, when I started doing institutional economics is the study of how the rules of the game in society affect human behavior, right? So in a society, we have these rules of the game. Now, most of those rules will probably be formal rules, like in the form of laws and legislation, right? You can do this, you can do this other thing. But there are other rules that are kind of informal or implicit. Culture, norms of behavior. You won't play your guitar or your drums at night because then your neighbors won't be able to sleep. Now, there is no formal rule that says you shouldn't be able to do that, but there is this kind of understanding, this rule of behavior, these norms, this culture, right? And all of these rules of the game, formal and informal, determine your behavior. And your behavior ultimately determines what happens to the country, right? So if we all behave lazily, for example, if that's kind of the way we do things, then nothing is going to happen to that country. If our behavior implies cheating, for example, if our behaviors implies corruption, then you're imposing barriers to development. So I started realizing that if we have good rules of the game that promote good behavior, that promote good incentives, then people were going to do good things. They were going to wake up in the morning and produce stuff and create stuff and innovate, and ultimately, the country was going to take off. So at that point, I realized, rules of the game are very important. And then, of course, the next question is, well, what are those rules of the game? How do we set them up in such a way that we determine good incentives? And the first thing that you, or the first issue that you face when you're trying to establish those rules is, who are those rules going to benefit? And at that point, you start seeing the role of individual liberty, right? Or individual freedom. Like, if those rules of the game allow me to develop my life project, if I have the freedom to determine what I do with my resources, if those are the rules of the game, then because I'm a self-interested human being by nature, I'm going to try to do the right thing for me. So then you start realizing that the rules of the game need to promote or secure freedom. And then the rest is you continue in the path that you and I and many scholars have continued working on. But I think that for me was the beginning, to realize that rules of the game that promote freedom and individual liberty are the ones that ultimately are going to promote development as well.
What do you see as the connection between a college education and sort of left-leaning economic views that are anti-freedom?
Well, we're surrounded by it, right? I mean, at this point, that's the name of the game in college education, at least in this country. It is just amazing to see how college professors, college students, administrators, and everybody else involved have fallen prey of this idea that self-interest, individual liberty in the sense of securing, promoting, defending your self-interest is a bad thing. That we need to curb individual freedom and liberty because that's going to lead you to just promote your self-interest, and they don't see the connection of self-interest also promoting that of society. When I try to tell the story of the invisible hand, for example, right? The idea of Adam Smith, which was, if I pursue my own self-interest, there is this kind of invisible hand that is going to drive my efforts, my individual efforts, into the promotion of good for society. They look at me and say, well, that invisible hand is too invisible. We need to make it more concrete. We need to really guide this hand. And therefore, we need to curb that freedom and actually make you do things for society. And that's what we have. That's what we have in college campuses across the country. The facts are the fact. The statistics will show you that when you ask college students if they favor socialism, they will, 38% of college students would say that they favor socialism versus something like 20% in the overall population. So definitely there is a tendency in college to be more left-leaning than not. And I think that's a tremendous work for people like you and I.
So you're the director of the Center for the Study of Economics and Liberty. So what are you doing differently at your college that other colleges are not doing?
So I am privileged in the sense that in the School of Business, at least in my university, we are very open and don't discriminate any type of school of thoughts. And as a result, we received this grant from the BB&T Foundation a long time ago, about probably some 12 years ago or so. John Allison,
Hmm.
who you know, was heavily involved in that and creating these BB&T centers across the country. Mercer University was one of the universities that received the grant. So we developed this center, but of course, after 10 years, the BB&T Foundation didn't renew the grant. But we have continued doing the stuff that we were doing because we believe in the mission. So, one of the central components of our center, for example, is to teach Atlas Shrugged. So we teach Atlas Shrugged every spring. And we also do, a lot of other activities like bring speakers to campus. We promote research, undergraduate research grants for our students. So we take them to conferences, and we try to create a buzz. We try to create talk on campus about the kind of stuff that we do. We know that some professors are not going to like that. In fact, we've gotten criticism and some professors trying to stop what we were doing. But it's fun. It's kind of the fight of ideas that you have to have in college. I am tenured, so and that's a good thing, because it could be problematic if not. But we move forward. We keep bringing speakers. We're always very respectful and very polite. You have to make sure that you do that, because some other people have other ideas, and you don't want to be disrespectful and mean or rude. So I want to get along with all of my colleagues in liberal arts, who perhaps are the ones that oppose the most to some of these ideas. But if you keep the party in peace and you keep being polite and move forward, I think that's the way to do it. And our students have benefited tremendously, I think.
So I like how you're doing this. You're sort of bringing this battle of ideas to campus and giving voice to some ideas that aren't really heard of on a lot of college campuses. I just wrote this piece for Foundation for Economic Education about why universities should teach Ayn Rand alongside Karl Marx. And you mentioned there that you're teaching Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I think that you guys devote a semester to this. What are some of give us some of the highlights of that semester? What are you pulling out that students are unlikely to hear elsewhere?
Yeah. So it is a long book, as you know, and therefore we need an entire semester to read it in its entirety. I play with the idea of just teaching a class in which we do some sections of Atlas Shrugged. Read, John Galt's speech here, read Francisco's thing here. But I realized that you wouldn't get you really wouldn't enjoy the experience if we teach Atlas Shrugged just as a philosophical book or a philosophical teaching. Students will get bored. They wouldn't see the human action behind it, right? And I think that's the story, the plot. It's very important. It's just as important, perhaps, as the philosophical lessons. So therefore, we said we're going to devote an entire semester and we're going to read the whole book. Now, as we read the whole book, every week we have complementary readings. And I got to say this, and my students do a tremendous work when they sign up for this class, because they have to read Atlas Shrugged, but they also have to read this additional complementary reading. So it's a lot of time commitment. So very proud of our students. But anyway, the complementary readings will go all the way from, say, read, Friedman, Free to Choose, some chapters, not the whole book. Hayek, Mises, but we also read people that have criticized these ideas, criticized capitalism, And so we read the Communist Manifesto, we read Marx, we read Engels, and so on. We also watch some videos. I mean, the syllabus is very generous in terms of giving room to all different kinds of ideas. And we always kind of contrast those ideas with what we're reading in Atlas Shrugged. That's kind of the purpose of the book. Now, your question, it's fantastic, because I also had to do this for a board of trustees. They summoned me to a board of trustees meeting one time, and they say, okay, we hear that you're teaching Atlas Shrugged. Tell us, why are you teaching Atlas Shrugged as an economics elective, right? And so I had to think carefully about my answer there, as you can imagine. And what I always say is, well, look, the title of the class is The Economics and Moral Foundations of Capitalism. It's Econ 450, The Economics and Moral Foundations of Capitalism. And that right there kind of embodies what we're trying to do. We have a system, a political system called capitalism, that has shown to generate very positive results for society. I mean, you look at the data, you look at the Index of Economic Freedom, you look at the countries that have applied capitalism versus the country that have applied the opposite system, say socialism, and you'll see how, the first countries have flourished, have developed, lifted people out of poverty. Perfect. Okay. I don't think anybody, not a lot of people, would argue against that idea, right? The question then is, does capitalism have a moral foundation? Right? Are we doing the right thing? Or is this just a utilitarian tool to get people out of poverty? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you could probably say, if you want to lift people out of poverty, well, then just say, forbid families from having more kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be one type of, say, solution, because we don't have money to feed more kids and so on and so forth. And so that's it. That's the way we're going to do it. Okay, but that would probably not be moral. So we have this utilitarian system that creates development. We call it capitalism. Are there moral foundations behind it? And so the purpose of the class is to provide that, right? But it's always relating it back to economics. I know that perhaps some other professors teach Atlas Shrugged in the philosophy department, maybe, right? Or in the sociology department.
I would love to learn that. I don't know how many philosophy departments are teaching it.
Right.
Probably not many.
But I could see that happening, right? In a philosophy department, perhaps. What we do is we are in an economics department, so we need to bring it back to economics. So what we try to do is to relate it back to economics. And what is economics? Is the study of choice, right? Facing scarcity. Is the study of choice facing scarcity and the unintended consequences of these choices, right? So if you think about that definition, choice, economics is about choice because we face scarcity, therefore you're forced to choose, and the unintended consequences of those choices. So here, the first question is, why do we have to choose? Well, because we cannot have everything we want at the same time. And that leads you to human action, right? We cannot have everything we want at the same time. Therefore, we have to choose. That's essentially what makes us humans. And therefore, with Atlas Shrugged, what I try to do is try to show the characters and show the students how all of these characters are making choices. And what choices are moral and what choices are not. When you look at the characters that we like in Atlas Shrugged, the heroes, the atlases, right? How are they making their choices? When they wake up in the morning, right? How do they start making choices? And one of the first things that you realize is that the first element, the first input, I wake up in the morning, the first input is facts, reality. Okay, it's 5 in the morning. It's not 7 p.m., and I have to have a cup of coffee, or I have to do, it's facts. And then once you understand those facts, reason. Yeah, your mind is the one that start putting together the facts and the reality that you need to make a choice, and you start making the choice. So what I try to do is I try to show the students all of these characters and show that look at the facts surrounding this person, look at the circumstances. He understands the circumstances. He doesn't fool himself or herself in the case of Dagny Taggart, right? And then they use their reason, their mind, to make those choices, right? Stop me if you. But what I'm trying to do is exactly that: facts, reason, and then the next question is, okay, why? What's the goal, right? And the goal here is always self-interest. Is I want to do something that is going to move my project forward, right? I am not really thinking about somebody else when I make those choices, or only to the extent that doing something for somebody else is going to benefit me, right? And I'm going to stop right here because but that's essentially the way I start approaching Atlas Shrugged in an economics class.
Yeah, and the way that you perhaps would think about the latter part. So, how does doing something for someone else benefit me? I mean, we all do this on a daily basis at work for customers. We own our own businesses. We're thinking about, okay,
Right.
what do people actually value? Uh, what could I create that would help me to move my life forward while also has this nice secondary benefit of helping your customers who therefore are willing to pay you, right?
That's right.
So, so I know that there are maybe some, I hope some professors out there who will listen to this that are thinking about teaching Atlas Shrugged as well. And for them, how do the students react to this? And what sort of classroom environment does this create in your experience?
Yeah. So I have mixed reactions, of course. You have to think, these are 20-year-olds never read Atlas Shrugged before. At the beginning, they are intimidated by the length of the book. But most of them, I want to say, have heard about Atlas Shrugged. Or at this point, at Mercer at least, they have heard of the class. They have, oh, look, you got to take that class because there is a book there that it's very controversial. And if you go to that class, the discussions are going to be very controversial. People are going to start, being very passionate about making their points. So it's a fun class. So they have heard that about my class, and they come curious to see blood, right? They wanna see the arguments, because this is a Socratic seminar. It's not like I'm teaching a lecture. We have the reading for the day, and then it's open discussion. What did you think about that? Why is that Reardon did this? What happened to Dagny here, and so on and so forth. So, when you start teaching this class at the beginning, people are gonna be like, "What in the world is this?" But then you kind of create a tradition in your school, and people want to sign up. In most cases, I would probably say 70% of the students are really changed by the experience. And this is why I keep doing this. I've been doing this since 2016, teaching this class every spring. I mean, it's really life-changing, right? It's a book that changes lives. When you start seeing people, again, waking up early in the morning with a purpose, with a goal, and fighting for that goal, it's very inspiring. Being competent. Hank Reardon, being competent. Francisco, being very competent. That is very inspiring for young students, number one. Number two, the second thing that inspires them is leave me alone. Right? That they start realizing that when people are left alone, when we can secure their property rights and allow them to pursue their dreams, good things happen. They see one of the unintended consequences of not doing that, for example, having a socialist system, they see that just leads to decay. And so, competency, purpose, and then leave me alone are probably the things that stick with students the most. And that's wonderful. I can see, in their eyes, I can see in the way they talk, I can see after, the semester is over, that has had a tremendous impact on them. Now, that's about 70% of the students. I would say that about 20% of the students are antagonistic. But that is what makes the class fun, because, if we just preach to the choir, and so they are antagonistic in the sense of, no, if you do this, people are just going to, if it's in your self-interest to be racist, you're going to be racist, and then that's going to be a bad thing. So we need to curb that type of freedom. Or if we don't have taxes, how are we going to feed the poor? And you have all of that stuff. Also, and I think I comment this to you when we were in Colombia. People have a hard time with these characters that are kind of in the middle. Cheryl, for example, Jim Taggart's wife, or oh god, the name is escaping me now. Dagny's friend
Eddie?
and collaborator,
Eddie Willers.
Eddie Willers, who you can see, you can tell that they are trying to do the right thing, but they don't have the courage or the skills that the Atlases have, and they die. And so they have kind of a hard time with that. Because they may think like, I'm not like Dagny, I'm not like Reardon, I'm never going to be like Francisco. Nobody's going to be like Francisco, right? I may be like an Eddie Willers. So what is my destiny? What am I going to do? And we talked about that. We talked about the purpose of those characters and what is that Ayn Rand was trying to show, and so on and so forth. But we get those type of conversations. So that's, I would say, about 20%. That gives you to 90%. And there is always the 10% that, they just want to pass the class, and then they don't they don't care much. They would show up and say something just to get their participation grade. But if only 10% of your class does that, I mean,
Right.
boy, I tell you, as a college professor, with most classes, you can get up to 50% or 60% of those that just want to pass the class.
Yeah.
Just to have 10% that don't care, it's a tremendous achievement. So I think a college professor should expect something like that if they want to teach this book.
That's incredible. Yeah, there's this big push on college campuses to cultivate diversity, quote unquote, and they're very focused on race and gender and sexual orientation. But really, the diversity that matters on a college campus is the diversity of interests and ideas. And it's really great to see that you're teaching Atlas Shrugged alongside the Communist Manifesto and a bunch of other ideas, and really bringing a conversation about these different ideas and giving people an opportunity to see them in play. Do you think that a lot of students leave the class with a really good understanding of the fact that it's actually good to pursue your own interests?
I think so. John Allison, I don't know if you've heard this. He has a podcast with Russell Roberts, famous economist from George Mason University. And he describes the 10 core values that he had when he was CEO of BB&T, the bank. And he says, okay, what are your 10 core values? And he's like, this is what each of my employees will get. First day you're hired, you get these 10 commandments sort of thing, the core values. So what are those? He says, well, the first one is independent thinking, right? Second one is reality, A is A. Productivity, honesty, integrity, pride. So in a word, essentially what he's trying to describe is purpose, right? If you understand the facts, if you can reason, if you're productive, if you're honest, you have integrity, you will eventually end up being very proud of yourself. And I think that students understand after reading this book that one of the things that you get if you are competent, if you wake up in the morning, if you have a purpose, if you fight for what you believe, is that you're going to be proud of yourself. And I think this sticks with them, this sense of pride. The other thing that I think it's important, and students, I think they take away, is the definition of justice. Okay, so when you say justice nowadays, especially in college campuses, essentially what you're going to be saying is people that need more should receive more.
Mm-hmm.
I did an entire debate, is on YouTube.
Yeah.
I did an entire debate on social justice. And the idea of social justice is essentially that those who need deserve more. And in the book, in Atlas Shrugged, and in our discussions, that idea of justice is very quickly, disregarded. Justice is those who do more deserve the most. Those who produce more deserve more. And that those contrasting views of justice are so important. The students are bombarded with the first idea of justice, those who need more. And that's, you enter into the whole thing of inclusiveness, inclusion, diversity, equity, That's college campuses today. That's what it is. Diversity, inclusion, and equity versus this other idea of justice. And if anything, that creates, some troubles in their mind, different ways of thinking, and that's what you need to do. I always say that's what you need to do. You need to risk offending people if you want to teach something.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons on equality. So I came to Atlas as a very confused 17-year-old, not sure about my purpose in life and what I wanted to do. And the lessons from that book really just changed the trajectory of my life. I was able to see heroes that were doing, they had seemingly normal jobs, but they were doing things that made this enormous impact on life. And it helped me to see how productive work is heroic. And so I can definitely echo that.
Yeah.
But, I think one of the lessons that you get from Atlas about equality is that the equality that matters is equality before the law. And Rand wasn't blind to the ideas that in America, this was increasingly not the case. I mean, the villains in that book are the people who are grabbing the gears of government and using government to get favors for themselves and to really just disrupt the entire economy by violating people's rights. So, what are the benefits that you get from teaching Atlas?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So first of all, I benefit because I reread Atlas. And I taught it 6 times, and I can say honestly, I read it 4 times. There were a couple of semesters in which we had too much going on, and therefore I just resorted back to my notes. But in 4 of the 6 times that I taught it, I reread Atlas along with the students. And every time you read it, you find new, things that you hadn't paid attention before. Little things that allow you to illustrate points better, right? Little things in the speeches, for example. And the more I read it, for example, the more sometimes I like John Galt as the main hero. Sometimes I like Henry Reardon. But for the last 2 years, I've been siding with Francisco. To me, Francisco is really the man, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the speech that he gives about money, for example, yeah, it's just fantastic. And this gave me the idea that I should put together a course similar to what I'm doing for undergrad, but for MBAs. And I don't think this is done or this has been done yet, where an MBA curriculum will have an ethics class. There are these ethics class, and all that they are taught is, what human resources would say, about ethics in the workplace. But they don't have a class in which they are shown that making money is a virtue. And I think that is a tremendous thing. I mean, we are producing masters in business administration, MBAs, that don't know or don't care, that making money is a virtue, that making money is a moral goal. In fact, they are kind of ashamed of it because they have to find ways to give back to society. Like, why do you have to give back to society? You haven't taken anything unfairly. In fact, what you've done by innovating, by producing, is you have improved the lives of millions of people, right? If you're successful, it's because you have improved the lives of millions of people. And therefore, making money is something that you should be proud of. And the more money your company makes, the proudest you should be. But MBAs are not taught this. And they go out in the real world to, work for companies without having a moral understanding of what they're doing. And I think this is one of the lessons, again, of Atlas Shrugged, right? The moral ground. I mean, in Atlas Shrugged, you have these atlases, these heroes that, go on a strike because they think that they are being condemned by society. And they are not willing to give society, that rotten society, the moral ground. That's essentially what they're doing, right? Because, Dagny and Reardon stay in the real world fighting the looters because they don't realize that that they have lost the moral ground. They continue to think that they are doing the right thing, and they continue to allow these looters to exploit them. Whereas John Gall says, no. What we need to do is to pull out because they are not being fair with us. They are not giving us what we deserve. So making money as a virtue, I think it's an important and a brilliant opportunity for an MBA class, which goes against the current trend of, giving back and companies, oh yeah, we make money, but I'm sorry, don't worry, we're going to create a foundation.
Conscious capitalism.
Right.
Yeah, every time somebody does a search in our search engine, we're going to plant a tree or
that's right. We have to show that we're doing something like that because otherwise you will not like us.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you browse through Indeed, for example, or any job search engine or whatever, you'll find that among the things that you need to send now, not only you need to send a cover letter or your CV, but you also have to send a diversity statement or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's more and more common because they need to show that they care. Right? And this is a way to care. Say, look, we're hiring only if they are committed to these ideas. So I think this is a powerful lesson from Atlas, and I think it should be taught in an MBA. I don't know if I answered your question though, but
yeah, I think you've definitely hit on some of the benefits of returning to Atlas, seeing some of the points made from different angles and really identifying more with one character over another.
Yeah.
Where can people keep up with your work and just kind of keep a tab on what you're doing there?
Yeah, so we have a webpage that it's very nice. It's very neat. In fact, it's CSEL, because it's this Center for the Study of Economics and Liberty. So csel.mercer.edu, very easy to remember. And that's where you'll find all of our activities, our research grant awardees, the conference that we're going to, the speakers that we're bringing. We hope to have Father Sirica in the fall here to talk about social justice, in fact. And that's, you're going to find the work of our professors as well, the ones that are affiliated to the center. And then I have a personal webpage where I keep my research, my papers, my interviews. I am very active with media, especially in Spanish, but also do English. So my webpage is antoniosaravia.wordpress.com. Yeah.
Any last thoughts on the connection between freedom and human flourishing?
Freedom and human flourishing. I mean, that's what this class is all about. That's what we do. If we don't have freedom, there is absolutely no way to flourish. This is not only a philosophical claim; it's also a utilitarian claim. If you look at the stats, if you look at the correlation between the index of economic freedom and indices of human development, like life expectancy, child mortality, and you name it, you'll see that countries where you have more freedom, you have better outcomes. And so, without freedom, you won't be able to develop as a human being and as a society. There is a passage from Atlas Shrugged. They're looking for the motor or the inventor of the motor of the 20th century motor company. And they find this guy, Lawson, and they are, questioning him and say, do you know anything about the motor or who invented the motor? And the guy started feeling afraid of all of these questions. And he says, wait, lady, I am perfectly innocent. Since I lost my money, since I lost all of my own money for a good cause, my motives were pure. I wanted nothing for myself. I've never sought anything for myself, Miss Taggart. I can proudly say that in all of my life, I have never made a profit. Right? And that is, my students are like, what in the world? So this guy is proud of not making money because that would be seen as selfish. Yeah. And what we want to do with this class is to turn that around and say making money is like winning medals at the Olympics, right? It's just a reflection of your effort. It's just a reflection of how much you have put into it. And that is a deeply moral behavior. So I think that's why the class has been so successful so far at Mercer.
Love it. Thank you for doing it. It's a huge service to the students and to the world at large, really. Thank you, Antonio, and thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Philosophy for Flourishing. If you're enjoying the show, definitely leave a comment, give us a rating, and as always, feel free to email me at john@theobjectivestandard.com. Until next time, happy flourishing.